export sun will chill tonight with all her fans. The doctor's in, whisper in. So I hope you all tuned in.
Kapla warriors, today is a good day for a smoothie. I made myself a delicious smoothie today using oat milk, peach flavored skyr, and I paired that with some tropical frozen fruit medley and then a little bit of protein powder. Oh, and a little splash of unsweetened soy milk. It was good. I wouldn't say delicious, not as good as the one I get at the store or at the smoothie shop. I don't know how they hide the texture and flavor of the protein powder so well, but I would definitely say it was good. So, Mexican Zubat, feel like it's been quite a while. You been here under a different name, or you just back now? So, let's review the schedule before we get started. Today is Cozy Stream. I'll be reading from the NIKKE Wiki, and schedule is Mondays are gaming, Tuesdays are ASMR cozy streams, Wednesdays are class with Dr. Export. Last week you voted for this Wednesday's class to be how to talk to women. Obviously that's a really big subject and highly personal, but we will scratch the surface, if you will. Thursdays are gaming, except this week, since I'm going out of town Friday night, Thursday will be impression stream. So today, hopefully you all voted for the impression election with the sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Good night, God of Wolves, and thanks for 4 months of Prime subscription. Wow, didn't even realize it had been that long. Thank you very much. And so Thursday will be impression stream. You should have voted today in the impression election between Sugar, Lilywise, Wells, or Grave. So hopefully you did that. So, plan for today, day 1 of NIKKE Wiki cozy stream. Gonna start with Snow White since she's best girl and she's the GOAT. Do you guys want the rain background or the cozy rain background or the game as your background? So you can see here, best girl. She is wearing underwear. Wish my bangs would lay that good. So we're starting with Snow White. Happy to see you again too, Mexican Zubat. So starting with Snow White, what articles should I read from Snow White's content? Could do the Bond story. There's a whole lot to choose from. Main story, Bond story. All right. Just catch up. Bravenwolf, I'm talking about. Do you not see? I had Snow White up previously, and you know her poncho makes it look like maybe she's not wearing pants. But she is. All right, everybody. Tuck yourselves in. Wait, I scrolled too far. What has happened? Here we go. Snow White Bond story. Oh, whoopsies, I screwed it up. And Bond story. What do I keep doing here? Come back, Pawn Story. Here it is. And this is a summary, not the full story, by the way. Okay. Episode 1, Castaway in a Storm. On a routine patrol mission, the protagonist's encounters are preparing to go out on a routine patrol, only for Anise and Neon to remember something they forgot, much to Rappy's exasperation. The four step off the elevator to go back, but just as the protagonist is about to disembark, the elevator shuts on its own and rockets up to the surface with him still trapped inside. It eventually crashes to a halt on the surface, and the protagonist squeezes his way out the smashed doors. He finds himself stuck in a desolate part of the surface, the elevator non-operational. He tries using his phone, only to find the alpha particle concentration is over 90%. That makes me think over 9,000. And with no radio tower in sight, communications with the Ark will be impossible. A dust cloud is building on the horizon, a mob of raptures lured by the sounds of the elevator. The protagonist climbs up a ruined surveillance post for a vantage point, finding a flare and megaphone inside. He lights the flare and waits to see what it notices at first, a would-be rescuer or a rapture. 6 hours later, night has fallen and the flare has gone out. The cold winds chill the protagonist to the bone, and his consciousness flags, one of the downsides of having bones. Just then, a familiar shape and voice appear before him. It's Snow White, wondering what he's doing out here. She hands him a heat cloak, which quickly warms him back to a coherent state. 30 minutes later, and the protagonist has finished explaining his circumstances to Snow White. She remarks that this was likely a failure in the Ark's underground pathway systems, which are labyrinthine and complex in order to allow the elevator to reach a plethora of locations on the surface. She also explains that this area they're in has a high alpha particle concentration and no radio tower anywhere, meaning there's only one way for the protagonist to get rescued: traverse the surface to find an elevator to take him back to the Ark. Luckily, Snow White knows where such an elevator is, but it's quite a long ways away. Given the distance, plus accounting for possible rapture encounters, and factoring in the protagonist being a human who needs sleep and rest, unlike Gilgamesh, it would take approximately 2 weeks for them to reach the elevator on foot. Wouldn't take that time for Gilgamesh. He can go 20 leagues in a day. The protagonist is apprehensive, but Snow White promises to get him back to the Ark, a promise that serves to buoy his trust. Episode 2, How to Soothe an Empty Stomach. Have you ever had anyone tell you if you're hungry, just drink water? Yeah, there's a special place in hell for those people. Snow White notices the protagonist slowing down and urges him to move, as they're in an open space exposed from all sides. She bids him to endure until they can take shelter in some nearby ruins, and he complies. Yeah, you can't look weak in front of Snow White. 2 hours later, the protagonist is slowing down again, and Snow White becomes concerned. She asks how long he's been on the surface and when he last ate, the answers being approximately 30 hours and nothing since, respectively. Snow White decides to adjust their travel route to take them towards the ruins of a farm, hoping to maybe scavenge some food. The protagonist looks uncertain, to which Snow White explains that the surface is a desolate place, where luck is more often than not the deciding factor in whether you find supplies to survive or not. At the ruined farm, Snow White spots 3 raptures pacing around. The protagonist suggests waiting for them to move away, but before he can say or do anything, Snow White opens fire, steadfast in her refusal to leave a single rapture alive. She dispatches the 3 near the barn, and the two rummage through the barn for victuals. In parentheses, it says food/provisions, in case you don't know what victuals are, in case you aren't from the Middle Ages. A while later, and all they have to show for their scavenging is some drinking water and food cans. There was some grain, but it's been eaten by rats, and the leftovers were likely mixed with rat droppings. Okay, well those are probably good for you. Oh, headache, sorry, just a second. Snow White I lost my place. Snow White checks one of the cans, but they've expired 20 years ago and the contents have definitely spoiled. They're in no shape to be eaten safely by a human. Snow White swallows down the rest of the can, a grimace on her face. She explains that NIKKEs aren't as susceptible to food poisoning as humans, but suggests the protagonist keep his distance after she downs the rest of the cans. Oh, she's gonna have some major bad gas. The water is safe for the... Sorry, I'm making myself laugh. I'm hilarious. The water is safe for the protagonist, but they still need to find something he can eat so he'll have the energy to travel the rest of the way. Just then, a squeaking is heard and Snow White stomps her foot. She catches a rat by the tail, squirming and quite lively. She hands the protagonist a knife, suggesting he gut the rat and roast it for food. The protagonist is squeamish, but Snow White reaffirms that the surface as it is will not accommodate for anyone, human or NIKKE. The only way to survive is to eat whenever one can, and eat it to the very last bite. The protagonist reluctantly agrees to eat the rat, to which Snow White offers to finish off the leftovers. Is Snow White like an owl and she can just eat the bones and then have one of the spit out the what do they call it that owls vomit out? I forgot. Yes, Marius, it's the wiki summary. 1 hour later... Wait, did I already read this? The protagonist has finished eating the rat. Took him an hour to eat the rat. With the immediate food situation sorted, Snow White urges him to keep moving. Episode 3, How to Go to Sleep. Sometime later, the protagonist's vision has begun to blur. He can barely make out what Snow White is saying to him, much less respond. Snow White notices this, and after jolting the protagonist awake, guides him to a small alcove surrounded by rubble, barely big enough for him to fit in. She bids him to lie down and rest without moving, ignoring his protests by telling him that some raptures can detect heat signatures, meaning they can't light a fire or use her heat cloak to warm up. The debris will suffice to obscure him from such sensors. Thank you, DM Pellets, that's what I was looking for. The debris will suffice to obscure him from such sensors, but not if he moves too much and dislodges the rubble. Besides, the point isn't to let the protagonist get a good night's sleep, so long as he spends a brief moment to rest his eyes and body. Even a power nap should be enough to let him go on for longer. As for setting up decoys, Snow White has two reasons not to do that. For one, she'd rather not kill any rapture she finds than she'd rather unalive any rapture she finds than evade it. For two, she doesn't even carry decoys with her. Her weapons and ammo already take up way too much of her ability to carry, so she has little to spare hefting anything else with her. It's also why she can't just pick up the protagonist and carry him the rest of the way, to say nothing of how vulnerable they'd both be like that. Blacklight, and that's why she's the goat. Well, one reason. As Snow White sets herself up to keep a lookout, the protagonist is having some trouble sleeping. To say nothing of the conditions present, Snow White's earlier words warning him against dying in his sleep are filling him with mind-freezing fear. He calls out to Snow White, complaining about a spider crawling over him. She tells him to eat it as it crawls over his face, but he keeps still and lets it go elsewhere. As she repeatedly jolts up to look at something before settling down, the protagonist asks Snow White why she's so eager to fight every rapture she sees. She answers that avoiding raptures is the wrong choice to make, and sees it as her duty to unalive every rapture she finds, eventually taking down the queen and returning the surface to humanity. Oh, sorry, Bravenwolf. Thank you for also saying pellets. Hades, stop pointing out the plot issues. They're actually on purpose. As far as any dreams or wishes for what comes after, she's lost them all to time and experience. But as the protagonist closes his eyes, Snow White quietly admits that after all this is over, she'd like to gorge on food until her stomach's near bursting and sleep for days on end. Episode 4. Sorry if you see me closing my eyes. My eyes are really dry today, so I keep doing extended blinks. For the past few days, the protagonist has trekked along the road with Snow White, only having rats and vermin for food and power naps for sleep. His condition has deteriorated to the point where he can barely keep conscious, and he throws up anything he tries to eat. Snow White sets down her weapons and tells him to get on her back so she can carry him, but he refuses to have her go unarmed in case a rapture appears. Braven, I mean her not carrying him. The argument goes nowhere as raptures soon show up and the protagonist has to take cover while Snow White engages them. 1 hour later and the last rapture is down. The protagonist affirms his intent to carry on with his own 2 feet, refusing to let Snow White be caught weaponless against raptures. His confidence is enough to mollify Snow White, though she declares that she's dumping her weapons if she sees him teetering on the edge of consciousness again. 3 days later, the protagonist is squishing a spider so he can eat it, with a little help from Snow White to swallow it down. I feel like a spider's not enough calories to really do you any good. 2 days later, Snow White comments that they're now passing through an area where there will be more food sources, though it still won't be any actual food like in the Ark. She rips the bark off a nearby tree to reveal a nest of giant slugs, which is what she was referring to by more food. She bids the protagonist to eat all of it, before backpedaling to ask he save some for her. DM, I'll think about it. A while later, the two stop, having spotted a horde of raptures dead ahead. Despite the protagonist's concern about the size, Snow White is resolute to take on the horde all by herself. After the dust settles, Snow White stands above the corpses of countless raptures, her body littered with injuries. She tells the protagonist to hand over some rapture parts, which she begins attaching the parts to herself. She explains that there's no place for repair or maintenance on the surface, except maybe one, but it turns out rapture parts work surprisingly well as far as jury rigs go, after a little work is done on them. In response to the protagonist's unspoken question, Snow White elaborates that by this point, approximately 30% of her body is now rapture parts, something she considers a fair step since she sees it as becoming a monster to rival the raptures. You might notice they're foreshadowing the NIKKE rapture connection. Not kingdom connection, that's different. The protagonist tries to persuade Snow White to go to the Ark to get help, but she remains steadfast on fighting on the surface, wanting to end the rapture menace as soon as possible. To her, every rapture she lets slip by is a rapture that could go on to unalive a NIKKE, or even slip into the Ark itself. The protagonist questions if she wants to save everyone, to which she asks if he's not the same, wanting to help everyone he can reach. This mutual agreement is why Snow White feels a sense of kinship to the protagonist. Neither of them will compromise on their ideals. Episode 5, Pure White Savior. Okuyasu, would that have like a 0.1% drop rate? No respect, Pilgrim. The two find a hot spring that's filled with clean, running water. Snow White simply sees it as a drinking source, but after some nudging by the protagonist, agrees to let him have an hour to soak off the grime and stress. Snow White refuses to take a dip herself, preferring to look over her weaponry. At the protagonist's curiosity, she details how her 7 dwarves are supposed to work together to function in any combat scenario, though only 4 of them are currently in usable condition. As the protagonist soaks a little longer, he gazes at the surroundings. Judging by the ruined structures surrounding the spring, this area was likely a tourism spot. Whoa, sorry, dizzy spell. Spotting a car in the distance, he jolts up and exclaims to Snow White, unfortunately still in his birthday suit. Snow White's only response is to tell him to sit back down. And Snow White said, "My eyes, my eyes." A while later, the two are examining the car. It's small, but in decent condition. A bit of tinkering and it should be able to run again. They're not just talking about the car. Snow White pulls an assortment of tools and parts from her body, astonishing the protagonist with just how much she seems to have on her. After a moment, the car is able to run again. It's too small to fit both of them, but even then, Snow White's weight would probably cause more problems, so she assures that she'll run beside the car instead. As the car thunders down the wastes, Snow White runs alongside. Yes, KV, exactly. She details that at this speed they can reach the elevator in 3 hours. Those 3 hours pass and the two arrive at the elevator. Its green light's a sign of everything working normally for once. The protagonist thanks Snow White for escorting him and cues up the elevator. But once it arrives, he senses vibrations that signal a rapture swarm. Snow White isn't surprised, but after all the noise the car made getting here, commenting the horde... Snow White isn't surprised, after all the noise the car made getting here, commenting the horde must at least exceed 100 units. The protagonist tries to stay and help, but Snow White refuses, citing there isn't much a lone human can do against raptures. Having him call back up is a no-go either. With the elevator's location known for the raptures, Snow White has to detonate the shaft after the protagonist arrived at the Ark. Refusing to heed any more protests, Snow White pushes the protagonist into the elevator, sends it down to the Ark, and readies to fight. DM, I don't actually use her. I'm a slave to the meta. In the closing gap of the elevator doors, he can see it. A lone warrior, carving a bloody swath in a horde of raptures. But even as dirt, parts, and blood mar her body, her color remains untarnished, a purest white that will never fade. And that, my friend, is why she's the GOAT, the best NIKKE. Sorry guys, my head's hurting real bad. Alright. What article should I read next? More Snow White? Or another next Bond story? Ether Bond story? Oh, Dirtfeather wanted to read about Splendoman. Splendoman, oh Splendoman. I'm like... looking for it. Doesn't look like there's an article for Splendoman, unfortunately. That's surprising. I think there would be. I'm gonna do Ether. Ether. Episode 1, A Disease on the Surface. The commander seems to have come down with a cold chill today and isn't feeling well. Rappy and Anise come to check on him, and upon the latter feeling his forehead, she can tell he has come down with some kind of illness. He admits to having have started to feel off since last night, and she deduces he caught a disease from the surface since their last operation. His condition suddenly worsens and his vision becomes blurry. He's barely able to speak because he's coughing constantly, and he developed a bad headache. As the two call MMR, the ailing protagonist passes out. He wakes up to hear the beeping sounds of a machine and smells the odor of disinfectant. After hearing some strange scratching noises, he learns that Ether is also in the room and was questioning if she should shower since her head itches, something he strongly wished to tell her to do. 1F, is it bad? I don't think I read it, just the summary. Her presence got on his nerves between the scratching and her smelling bad in general. This finally got her attention, and after proving he can still recognize her, she proceeds to do a checkup to make sure he is functioning properly. After noticing his cough still hasn't subsided yet, she hands him a cup filled with water to drink since the examination was over. She reveals he was sent to the MMR Research Center after he lost consciousness because the hospital is not equipped to handle what he caught. She tells him his choices are to either stay here or get sent to the rehabilitation center. Since number 7 has contracted an unknown disease from the surface that looks and acts similar to a cold but isn't one, there is no way to properly treat him currently. He now understands he's here so Ether can study the virus he's infected with, so therapeutic medicine can be developed to treat it. DM. Shift up for getting their own lore? Impossible. I'm imagining the Thanos meme when I say that. While he was worried Ether would also get sick because of him, she assures him that she will most likely never catch a human transmitted illness, an HTI, since NIKKE are completely inorganic aside from their brains. What about one of those brain amoebas? Only if a virus is modified to affect NIKKE specifically and was injected into her by a syringe would she be concerned. While the two are glad they don't have to worry about Ether, he was just concerned about her general safety and she didn't want to be replaced. She shared that she spent the past few nights tending to him, something he appreciates. She also gives him a pill that contains an incomplete version of the medicine that will help him. Though he has some worries, she assures him that since he's neither an inmate at the rehabilitation center, nor is he one of her personal test subjects, she has no right to experiment on him, and the pill will cause him no harm. He drinks the water with the pill. After sharing that caring for him was also the reason she hasn't taken a shower recently, she takes out a tablet and asks him to sign a consent form so his personal belongings can remain safe. I can go without a shower for like at least a week and not smell bad. So, I don't know why she's so nasty. But he will suffer consequences if anything from the lab gets released. After sharing, he would be locked in isolation without food or water until either he miraculously recovers on his own or dies a slow and horrible death because he will receive no treatment if he doesn't sign. He does as he is told with some more convincing. Now that she's done doting on him for today, Ether tells number 7 to get some rest and to press the call button if he needs anything. After profusely coughing some more, he falls asleep. The following day, someone slips a piece of paper under his door after he hears someone knocking on it. It has PM 11, furthest to the right, case 01, HEL, written on it, with the other end of it torn off. He interprets HEL to mean help. Episode 2, furthest to the right, HEL. It's 10:30 p.m., and the commander has only the sound of a ticking clock to entertain him. The moving of its hands to the ticking sounds reminds him of what Ether had done to him earlier. She performs some tests to see how he was doing after taking the experimental medicine. Overall, his health is improving, minus the light coughing and a low-grade fever. She collected a sample of his blood. His appetite is normal, and he is able to walk again. After trying and failing to get her to listen to him, he asks for a watch so he can keep track of time. Aramis, maybe Ether smells bad because when they gave her NIKKE body, she got a BBL. You guys read the articles about that? That was an internet thing a while back. Stinky BBLs. DM and redacted, we need shift up to answer if rabies would affect a NIKKE. This is critical lore knowledge and more interesting than the 4 Beasts plot. But usually you get a NIKKE through a bite, right? So I guess, would the bite inject it? Would that work? Speaking from experience out of context, you mean with the BBL? No, I don't have a BBL. But that was like a big internet thing a while back. Did no one else read that? It's like all over. Ah, Zephyr, glad you're here. Yeah, apparently it's hard to keep a BBL clean, is what I hear. Makes sense. Gotta get a bidet. She collected a sample of his blood. His appetite is normal, and he is able to walk again. After trying and failing to get her to listen to him, he asks her for a watch so he can keep track of time. Though she feels that would be a waste of time since he can't do anything until he's fully cured, she blames that thinking to ignorance on her part and agrees to find one for him. He also asks if he can leave his room, and she allows him to move around the current floor if he needs to, but is forbidden from entering the other rooms. Number 7's requests make him seem suspicious to her, since he's acting as if he needs to see someone. She initially allows him to see the person he was looking for, but denies it after since she reminds herself he isn't allowed to see anyone until he feels better. She asks to accompany him on his stroll, but he assures her that there's no need for her to join him, something she agrees with since she would find the walk to be a burden. Isaiah, it's hard as a woman to be happy with your own butt because you are constantly seeing all over the internet women who've like edited their photos or they're posing in a way to make it look like their butt's really big. And then you look in the mirror and you're like, I'm able to wash my own butt, so it must be too small. Just kidding. No, it is annoying though. People are always posting. And you see it all the time and they make you feel bad. Because making women feel bad about their bodies and making people feel bad about their bodies in general, men too, is an industry. That's how they sell things. It's one of the most effective ways to sell things. Lost my place. After rising from her chair, Ether accidentally rips one of her leggings and initially asks him to get her another one from the first floor, until she remembers he's not allowed to go to any other floor. After almost convincing her to let him get it for her, she decides to wear them as is and deal with the consequences. She leaves not long after. Left alone in the dark, lifeless room, 27 minutes have passed, and the commander once again reads the paper he found earlier. Curious about what it means, he leaves his room to follow the instructions on the slip. He heads to the furthest room down the hall and attempts to peek into the room on the right while coughing all the way. He eventually has to stop to catch his breath, but after hearing someone else coughing louder than him, he continues his shambling march. Turns out, the coughing is coming from the room the slip instructs him to go to. The room itself is Case 01. After listening in further, someone else also appears to be inside. After moving closer to the room, he can tell Ether's the one talking. After pushing the door open, DM, you know what's crazy too is I feel like the pressure for men to be crazy ripped, like, it went crazy after the 90s, because if you look at like movies from the 80s and the 90s, when like the hot male lead is shirtless, like Tom Cruise in Top Gun, or like Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing, like they're fit, but they're not like crazy ripped. But nowadays, like these actors do these movies where they like dehydrate themselves so that they have like this insane six-pack. So it's like crazy, like the change that happened. Sometime, I feel like it started around the time superhero movies got really big. Like all of a sudden, men are expected to be like insanely ripped, like bulging out, where I feel like the standard really changed. You can see it in my Luke Skywalker action figure that was made in the 90s. If you compare him to the original action figures, he looks ridiculous. I feel like this should be a class. Let's see. Wait a minute. I got lost. After listening in further, someone else also appears to be inside. Hey Sandy, good to have you. After moving closer to the room, he can tell Ether is the one talking. After pushing the door open enough to see inside, he sees Ether's back as she was working on something that hasn't been going well. She wants to determine how much of a dosage of the disease she has can be lethal, and after putting it in a syringe, she walks over to some NIKKEs who are coughing and tied up to a bed. It's kinky. And decides to make one of them a guinea pig to find out. His next cough alerts the scientist of his presence, and he proceeds to make his way back to his room while coughing up a storm, but notices the words Case 0 assigned to the room he is in. Unfortunately, she doesn't notice him and heads back to her research so as not to waste time on a wild goose chase. Yeah, Aramis, it's crazy. I was reading some of them talking about what they do to make themselves look like that, and it literally involves like dehydrating themselves so that their muscles will bulge out more, and they can only maintain it for like a few days. It's like, that's sick. How do they even act while they're doing that? Like, how do they even push through? Episode 3, In the Case. How did we get on this topic? Oh, it was me with the BBLs. Yep, that's just how my brain be, all over the place. As more time goes by, the protagonist slowly recovers, though his persistent cough still remains. After questioning Well, I'm talking 1F more the coughing part. What's with the coughing part? After questioning him about what he did last night, Ether shares she noticed someone sneaking around and was curious if he saw anyone suspicious. He had no answers for her, which was a shame. After taking his medicine again, she decides to call it a day since she spent the past 3 nights researching without any sleep, so she wants to nod off and take a bath. Gross, a bath. Baths are gross. He asks her what case 0 means, and while she forgets at first, she reveals that the 0 means original. Oh, it's an O. Okay, sure. I thought it was 0. Dumb. Wait, it's not about Aramis. Wait, what? Okay. Missed something in the conversation. Anyway. He admits that he was curious about it. Something she can understand given that he's been bedridden for a while now. But she assures him that he will be well enough to resume... Oh. Taking on missions soon. Baths gross me out, 1F. After telling him to think more clearly, she shuts the door to his room behind her. DM, she knows. She's pretending not to so he can do what he's doing without her bosses getting angry. It's a theme for her. Since it's now 3 p.m. and the protagonist has nothing better to do, he decides to take a nap. His slumber was haunted with what he had discovered before. After thinking things over, he still has no idea what Ether's intentions with the virus she extracted from him are. Why she modified it to target NIKKE specifically. Why she has NIKKEs trapped in that room. Or what case original even means. His thoughts cloud his mind for 8 hours. Now 11 p.m. like the paper says. He's determined to visit Case 01 again to find some answers. On his way back to the room he peeked into before, he notices the rooms he passes are all called Case, with numbers after them in descending order starting with 5. He tries to open a few of them, but they are locked. After stopping to cough again and to regain his breath, he realizes that he can no longer hear coughing coming from the room. He eventually reaches Case 01 and proceeds to open it again, only to discover it is completely devoid of NIKKEs. The NIKKEs that were here have disappeared, and only the syringe that Ether used before was left as a clue to anyone's presence. He moves towards the table with the syringe, but feels a muzzle touch the back of his head. How does the protagonist not know what Case 0 meant? Maybe it was mysterious if in the original it literally said Case 0 in English for the Korean translation? The scientist now... He moves toward the table with the syringe but feels a muzzle touch the back of his head. The scientist now knows that he was the rat she's been searching for. But he wants her to explain everything that's been happening in this room to him. She initially refuses to tell him since he is not her superior here, nor is he a commander to her. She only considers number 7 to be her lab rat. After stealing the syringe, he threatens to inject himself with whatever's inside of it in his arm, unless she starts talking. He understands that the syringe contains a modified strand of the virus he contracted that can afflict NIKKEs. Though she was surprised he was willing to potentially unalive himself for this, he warns her that as her patient, if anything happens to him, she will have to take responsibility. DM, hey, spoilers. I'm going to be a speech therapist NIKKE that teaches raptors to talk. 1F, no, hot springs would be good, but baths are no. I'm okay with like a spa, but like a bath in my house or anyone else's house, that's a no. She finally understands why Suin considers him a pain in the neck and confirms that if he did die from the modified virus, word would certainly get out. Despite how troublesome explaining things will be, she has no choice but to do so, given his threats. She tells him that they should go somewhere more private to talk, and she then shoots him with an anesthetic bullet as payback for threatening her. Though it won't unalive him, he passes out as a result. After number 7 regains consciousness later than she expected, Ether realizes she should have just knocked him out. He discovered that the scientist moved him to another room. After giving him some water to drink, he makes it clear that he wants her to explain herself, and will refuse her treatment if she doesn't, even if she administers it by force. After getting annoyed at her constant rambling, she shares that this center specializes in diseases found on the surface, and each floor deals with a different type of virus. She in particular is studying the one that afflicted him to understand things like its molecular structure, any negative effects on the body, how it changes after it deteriorates, the rate and speed of infection, as well as serving as a basis to help ultimately create therapeutic message that can cure it. DM, didn't you see Kingdom Connection? Just say nymph and everything impossible is excused. Each individual virus is studied in a case room. He was placed in the original case as he was the first one to contract it, and he will return to the Ark once he fully recovers, which is her main goal. As for why other NIKKEs are being experimented upon, they are the cheapest test subjects money can buy, despite the fact a virus needs to be modified so it can be transmitted to them in the first place. Though their anatomy is different from humans, their souls are similar to them, and they are good at verbally responding to her questions. None of them consented to being experimented on, but know what they are getting into. She considers this a necessary evil, since if the NIKKEs don't get infected, so the research center develops new medicine, nor tests them for safety reasons or side effects, no one would willingly volunteer. This Bond story is so dumb and makes no sense. It's just Ether and MMR are evil. She also shares the medicine he's been taking has been swallowed by NIKKEs beforehand, with the end result being it is safe for human consumption. In more elaborate terms, Case 01 is where the virus is studied to determine its infection process and symptoms compared to other similar viruses, and where therapeutic medicine is created to treat it. KV, I was thinking the same thing. I feel like maybe that was also a translation issue, because that doesn't make sense. The first dose of the medicine is tested in Case 02, and as things progress, the most effective and least dangerous medicine is sent further down the rooms. Case 03 deals with the most amount of side effects the medicine can have, while Case 04 deals with the opposite. The resulting concoction is thoroughly tested in Case 05 and is then able to be consumed by the patient. After learning how medicine is made, that makes me think of Schoolhouse Rock, like this is a really disturbing episode of Schoolhouse Rock. The commander felt sick to his stomach. He asks about what happens to the NIKKEs after they're no longer needed for experimentation, and she reveals none of them receive treatment, and they are either discarded or unalived. DM, I mean, that's Johan, isn't it? It didn't give... Thank you, K-Chim, because I didn't feel it vibrate to tell me to take, steps. Now that she's been thoroughly clear as to how things work here, she wants him to swallow the pill. Oh boy, I'm dizzy. He refuses unless NIKKEs are no longer used for medicinal research. Though she thinks he is threatening her again, he offers the use of his body to test the medicine instead, and pleads with her to cure... Sorry, it's hard to read standing up. The NIKKEs who are infected for his sake. His refusal to cooperate, his disregard for her orders, and his constant threats are proving very troublesome to her. If Ether abandons using NIKKEs as test subjects for the sake of his idealism, she would have no means to create new medicine anymore. He would rather die than sacrifice others to keep him alive. She believes using others for science is human nature. DM, fair enough. After sharing that Splendimin is created through similar research, she calls him a hypocrite for suggesting that her methods are immoral when more NIKKEs die fighting on the surface. Despite their back and forth, Ether agrees to make DM not cool. Ether agrees to make number 7 her lab rat, and after the medicine is completed, the NIKKEs who she experimented upon before will be treated with it. However, she warns him for the next week he will be enduring the experiments the NIKKEs would have dealt with, and will suffer the same consequences as they have, something he is willing to tolerate. She can't wait for the agony to crush his courageous spirit. Despite how stubborn he is, she is grateful for him lending himself for the pursuit of medicine. That's not exactly why. His first test will be to be reinfected with the virus he contracted, and after she injects it into his veins, she promises to take good care of him. Episode 5, The Abyss of Necessary Evil. After finally starting to recover from his illness, the commander is now in constant pain, having been willingly made into Ether's guinea pig. His throat is burning, his coughs are worse than before, and he is dizzy while his head is metaphorically on fire. I'm glad they said metaphorically. Throughout it all, she keeps her promise and gives him medicine constantly. Despite her insistence that he should give up for the day, he will continue the torture he is dealing with. She doesn't understand what he hopes to gain out of all this, since even if he does provide useful data, NIKKEs will still become test subjects anyway. After revealing he is doing this for his own self-satisfaction, she calls him cool, and after injecting something into his arm, she tells him she thinks a cool guy can handle this. That's a weird translation. She reminds him that he's braced 3 out of the 7 days of experimentation and hopes he survives the last 4. He's forced to close his eyes afterwards, and as she warned, the pain becomes worse as things go on. As the days go by, his condition becomes near critical. He coughs up blood and he has so many chills and aches. He has also developed shivers. Blacklight, I mean, at least the commander is in this Bond story, which is an improvement over some of the more recent ones. As the days go by, the condition becomes near critical. His condition. Oh wait, I already read that. He also develops shivers. Despite it all, he braves the physical and mental anguish nonetheless. The last 4 days come and go, and at last the final day arrives. Now he feels completely fine, and as if he wasn't in near endless suffering for the past week. Ether congratulates him for surviving and making a full recovery. He still worries about the NIKKEs, and after giving him a meaningful stare, she admits to still not understanding why he would risk his life for their sakes. She can't tell if he has nerves of steel or is mentally unstable. It be like that, with his personal assessment being both. This story has some similarities to the Gilgamesh story. It's like on the first day he had shivers. On the second day he had shivers. On the third day. Day 12 is the good day, right? Or after 12 was good. She reveals that the medicine works effectively and they were cured of the infection because of it. Though he worries she will take her anger at him out on the NIKKEs, she assures him despite how she may call them disposable, they are not slaves, and she considers them fellow staff members. You don't usually experiment on your fellow staff members. But okay. She will not play God to make herself feel better, and will only follow the rules and procedures specified by the research center. In regards to the NIKKEs, they will only be destroyed if a mind switch occurs, regardless as to why it happens. Ow. Since he's in full health, she's ready to send him off, so she can focus on other research. After thanking her for treating him, she personally escorts him outside. Now able to venture into the Ark freely again, Number 7 takes in a deep breath that he has been waiting so long to take. Ether can clearly tell he's elated to be able to explore the Ark again. She wants him to remember that the happiness brought by peace and liberty is valuable and wants him to enjoy life, even if he has to pretend to be blissfully ignorant by ignoring the Ark's darker sides. This is how she thinks he can live in his hypocritical paradise. He doesn't think that this is the case because sooner or later, people will become aware of the flaws the Ark has, and while Ether feels everyone will just ignore them, she assumes he never will. This story has inspired me to do a plug. Guys, whenever possible, try to buy products, skincare, bath care, house cold cleaning products that are certified cruelty-free. Because if they're not cruelty-free, they may have been tested on bunnies, pigs, beagles. It's horrible. They do horrific things to test products on them. It's even worse because these NIKKE have they can fight back, and they have apparently some knowledge of what they're getting into, but the animals don't, and they live horrible lives and are usually just like unalived after, and they don't ever get to live. So I know it can be more expensive, but whenever possible, try to search out cruelty-free brands. They're becoming much more common now. There's a lot of cruelty-free drugstore brands, especially at Target. That is all. After hoping he gets an incurable disease from the surface, so the next time he sees her, he becomes so weak that he can't threaten her with his own unaliving, she wants to see if his sense of justice can overcome human instinct. She wants to know if he considers this a necessary evil, and he has no response for her. She then says her goodbyes to her righteous lab rat, and expects to see him again once he's on the brink of death from contracting a fatal illness. As she turns her back on him, Ether has a parting gift for number 7. She gives him a piece of paper, but before he can get some answers about it, she runs off. Upon opening it, he finds a note that reads, P number 7, you'll be my experimental subject, won't you? You are such a righteous person. Upon taking out the other pieces of paper that he was given before, puts them together and they make a full message. PM 11, furthest to the right, case 01, help number 7. You'll be my experimental subject, won't you? You are such a righteous person. Having just realized becoming her lab rat was Ether's goal all along, he turns back to her, only for her to shh him before returning to the abyss where the necessary evil is brewing. He stares at her back and silently walks on the abyss. So, yikes. See, guys, she was a good guy. Kind of. Braven, none of this is canon because almost none of the Bond stories are canon, so none of them will join the outpost. Oh. Alright. So, all done for today. We'll do some more next week. Well, Blue Tot, nobody said she wasn't. That's a separate issue. Alright. I'm gonna get going a little early tonight because I've got that real bad headache. Tomorrow is class, How to Talk to Women. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. If you're not interested, make sure to join at the end to vote on next week's topic. And make sure you vote. I did DM, I took almost 1,000 steps because I must have already gotten my steps for 8 o'clock because it never buzzed at me. So, make sure to vote in the impression election. Thank you, Isaiah. And before I get going, let me do this request from Bravenwolf. Ready for me to switch gears. Isaiah, thank you. If you were a Star Trek fan, I'd have a joke for you about that, but I'm assuming you're not. I just make that assumption about most people, unless Charlemagne's here. Alright, ready? Crown impression for Braven. Prepare yourselves for an assault on your ears. Hello! Ether is to be permanently barred from the... start over, I failed. Ether is to be permanently barred from the kingdom. It's barred, my king. Yes, thank you, KHM. I appreciate it. Alright, everyone. Blue Tot, yeah. I'm a little sad because... I mean, generally, I'm sad not to have Trekkies around, but that would have been a really good joke. I'll just tell you. Basically the Ferengi species that we first see in Next Generation TNG, and then we also see in DS9 and a little tiny bit in Voyager, is the erogenous zone of a Ferengi is their ear. So that's all you need to know, and more than you wanted. It's really gross, and they way overdo it in the shows because apparently they think it's really funny or good content, but it's awful. So yes, Aramis, sometimes I fall asleep at night by trying to come up with one for each letter of the alphabet. I think I the other night, I think the only letter I failed on was X. Alright, friends. Majram.